All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. The Phoenix Suns' attempt to win a microwave NBA championship is failing miserably as it is setting up to blow up in their faces. Now, in late 2022, Matt Ishbia purchased the Suns and he vowed to make a big and immediate impact with this franchise. It wasn't long after Ishbia's purchase of the Suns that the franchise would acquire forward Kevin Durant from the Brooklyn Nets. And it also wasn't long before that where you saw the bulk of the players and coaches from the Suns' Western Conference Championship team from 2021 be gone. And after leading the Suns to three consecutive playoff appearances, head coach Monty Williams was let go in 2023 in favor of Frank Vogel. And after a 49-win regular season last year, Vogel was let go after the Suns were sent home in the first round of the playoffs. And now it's Mike Budenholzer's turn to lead the Suns, as just like Vogel, he brought an NBA championship with him to the Valley of the Sun, at least on his resume. Okay. But things are not working out that great so far for Budenholzer's Suns, as if the regular season ended today, Phoenix would be on the outside looking in. And when I say outside looking in, they're not even good enough right now to qualify for the NBA's play-in tournament. All right. You look at this, they're 31 and 37 through 68 games. And of course, there's just 14 games left for them in the regular season. And as bad as things have been for the Dallas Mavericks, and of course, they have been a train wreck of a franchise ever since they traded Luka Doncic. All right. The Suns still have not been able to overtake them for that final play-in spot in the Western Conference. You look at the defense of the Suns, or the lack thereof it, as they are 22nd in the NBA right now in opponent points per game. And for me, one question is, why have things not worked out for the Suns? Well, I've got several reasons. First and foremost, you know, this notion that you need a big three to go out there and win an NBA championship is misleading. Okay. You look at it, the Suns, they've got Devin Booker, they've got Kevin Durant, and then they brought in Bradley Beal. It's one of those where you have three guys who are phenomenal scorers. Now, of those three, KD will go out there and rebound and defend, but at the end of the day, you're still not looking at KD as a great defender. Bottom line is, when you think about KD, when you think about Brad Beal, and when you think about Devin Booker, you think about what they bring to the table as scorers. And honestly, at the end of the day, the way that the Suns roster is constructed, a lot of the guys on this team do the same thing. I feel like Phoenix would have been better off having a point guard. And of course, once upon a time, they had Chris Paul. They had Chris Paul when they went to the NBA Finals. But nonetheless, I say this because maybe Chris Paul or somebody else, the Suns need a point guard because Brad Beal needs somebody to set him up. Devin Booker needs somebody to set him up. KD might be the only one out of that trio that you can say, you know what, he doesn't need a point guard to get him going. And this notion again with this positionless basketball, oh, we don't need a true, uh, you know, point guard in a sense. That's a big mistaken notion, and I think the Suns have fallen for it. It's one of those where you look at it, and I think there's so much impatience on the part of Matt Ishbia. You can't keep jumping from head coach to head coach and think, you know what, we're going to sit up there and we're going to figure this thing out. It doesn't work like that. You know, winning a championship takes time. You have to develop chemistry. You've got to find a formula. And it's very difficult for a head coach, regardless of the sport, to really, truly implement his system within a year. And I feel like if you're jumping from head coach to another head coach after each season, I think that's an indoctrination on your organization more than it is the head coach. I get it. When Matt Ishbia took over as the Suns owner, he inherited Chauncey Billups. And honestly, you go back to when the Suns, lost in 7 games in the Western Conference semis to Dallas back in 2022. That team quit on Monty Williams. And of course, we saw the same notion the following year when the Suns lost in the postseason. They went to Frank Vogel. And again, I think Matt Ishbia, plain and simple, just pushed the panic button after Phoenix lost in round one last year. So you got rid of one head coach that won a championship in Frank Vogel, and now you bring in Mike Budenholzer. And typically with Mike Budenholzer, usually his teams are off to the races from the word go. But the problem is this time around, there's no diversity on these Phoenix Suns. It's basically the same guys doing the same exact thing on the court. And that, in my opinion, is why it's not working. And again, when you look at the fact that it's not working, it's something that looks bad on the resume of one Kevin Durant. And Kevin Durant, in my opinion, will always be remembered as one of the greatest scorers of the basketball and NBA history. There is nobody that should go out there and argue that. But there's going to be the critics that are going to say, hey, you had OKC up 3-1 on Golden State in the Western Conference Finals. You lost, and then you immediately went to the Warriors. Okay, you won a pair of championships with Golden State. You went to Brooklyn, and you wanted it to work out with Kyrie Irving. It did not work out there. It failed miserably. And I think this time around with the Phoenix Suns, it's going to be worse for KD than it was in Brooklyn. You look at Brad Beal. Again, like I said, Booker, KD and Brad Beal are scorers. All right. And it's one of those where Brad Beal, in my opinion, has been MIA since he came to Phoenix. All right. And if you've seen Brad Beal play with the Suns and you compare that to the bulk of his NBA career that was spent with the Washington Wizards, clearly he's a guy who was a big fish in a small pond because at the end of the day, if you're playing for the Wizards, you win 25 or 35 games during the NBA season, you put up 25 points per game, nobody really cares. Now, when you went to Phoenix, you're under the microscope, you're in the spotlight because a championship is expected there. And clearly, it has not worked out with Brad Beal in this trio. It's one of those where, again, you look at it, Phoenix is 31 and 37, and you have to ask yourself, is there any chance that the Suns can get their act together? Oh, wow. You look at it coming down the stretch right here. They've got 14 games left, which begins tomorrow night at home against the Toronto Raptors. But I'm going to tell you like this: the Raptors, first and foremost, are one of the worst teams in the NBA right now. But nonetheless, Toronto's trying to compete for a playing spot of their own. And then at the same time, it's starting to get to the point of that time of the season where you throw the records out. Why? Because guys on bad teams, they're playing for jobs and they're playing for contracts next season. So they're going to go out there and compete and try a little bit harder. So the Suns, in my opinion, are going to have their hands full. They lost today, and for the most part, they were getting dominated for the bulk of that game. They lost to the LeBron-less Lakers as it was a Luka Doncic show, especially early on this afternoon. But nonetheless, you look at this remaining schedule for the Suns. They still got 2 games with the Celtics. They're at the Knicks. They've still got a game with Minnesota. The Timberwolves are playing some good basketball right now. They've got OKC on the agenda as well. 2 games with Milwaukee, and of course, Coach Bud is going to be up for that game on April Fool's Day when he takes the Suns to Milwaukee. And I hope and I would imagine that the Bucks organization would give Coach Bud the video tribute and the respect that he deserves in returning to town. But nonetheless, Phoenix has a tough schedule remaining, and I'm going to circle this game on the calendar right now. Final game of the season for the Suns at the Sacramento Kings. And why is that important? Because Sacramento is currently in play-in territory. And just like Dallas, the Kings can't get out of their own way right now. They've lost their last 4. They're currently ninth in the West, while Dallas is 10th in the West. So it's there for the taking if you are the Phoenix Suns. But honestly, if you've watched this team so far this season, there's really not that much where you could sit up there and say and get excited about as far as the Suns season at moment. And then, just for the sake of argument, let's say the Suns, are able to overtake the Dallas Mavericks. It's one of those where how much hope can you really have as far as this team being a championship team, and they still have to find a way to get out of the play-in tournament? Remember, one bad game and you're done. Okay, so especially if the Suns go in there as the 10 seed. So at the end of the day, anything can happen in a one game winner take all situation. So if you're the Suns again, why put yourself in that spot to begin with? And this is the thing. We've seen it with other teams. I think back to when Mikhail Prokhorov first purchased the Brooklyn Nets, and now, of course, with Matt Ishbia and the Phoenix Suns. You can't simply just add water and mix and think you're going to go out there and win a championship. It takes time, it takes chemistry, it takes development, you name it. It's layers to it. And I think again, this is why this is blowing up in the Suns' faces right now because they simply felt, you know what? Let's go out there and get a Kevin Durant. Let's go out there and get a Bradley Beal. We can just sit up there and have anybody coach this team. Now, disrespect to Frank Vogel or Mike Budenholzer, but nonetheless, you can't just go out there with that scenario and think, you know what, we can just put anybody in here. We can put stars on this team and it will immediately turn around and end up in a championship. Doesn't work like that. You look at the Suns organization between 2010 and 2021. This was a Phoenix Suns team that did not make the playoffs. Okay, and they didn't make the playoffs until they got Chris Paul on that team. They got to the NBA Finals in 2021. We're up 2-0 on the Milwaukee Bucks, and of course, things unraveled in that series. The last 4 years, including 2021, the Suns have been a playoff team, but they are no closer to winning an NBA championship now than they were several years ago. And again, like I said before, it's simply not that easy. Uh, that's why, there's only one Larry O'Brien trophy handed out each and every year. So you look at these Suns, they've got to try to get out of their way. And they have a puncher's chance to make the play-in tournament. And the reason why is because I truly do think Sacramento will turn things around and get going. They still got talent on that team. The Suns got helped out due to the fact of the injuries with the San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama because they have really gone off of a cliff right now. And then, of course, the train wreck that is the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, the Luka trade and all of the injuries that the Mavericks have been dealing with, and they are holding on by a thread for that final play-in spot. But again, with that said, Phoenix still has not been able to overtake them because the Mavericks still have a game and a half lead on the Suns. And then on top of that, if you're Phoenix, you can't really take your foot off the gas because you've got to try to catch Dallas. But then on top of that, Portland's right there behind you. So this could possibly end with the Suns being on the outside looking in and watching the postseason this summer. And I think it would be a blemish on KD's resume. And I think when it's all said and done, these next couple of months are going to be the end of the brief Kevin Durant era with the Suns. I think he gets traded over the summer. I think he probably wants to be traded and go someplace else and try to go out there and chase another NBA championship. But it clearly is not working out in Phoenix. Again, a lot of talent was given up, a lot of picks were given up to go out there and try to make this work. And again, a lot of times, especially in the NBA, people do not pay attention to the picks that are given up when some of these star players are shifted around. And sometimes people don't pay attention to the quote unquote players who are thrown in to a deal to go out there and make it happen. You just look at Oklahoma City right now. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody really paid attention when the Clippers and Thunder made that trade that sent Paul George there several years ago. And of course, didn't work out with Paul George with the Clippers. He's now with the Philadelphia 76ers. And SGA, Shea Gilgis Alexander, has turned into a star. And I guarantee you that the Clippers would love to have a do over for that one. You think back with the Brooklyn Nets when they made that trade to bring in the likes of Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and they gave the Celtics 3 first round picks. And of course, those picks turned out to be lottery picks. Two of those picks ended up being Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. And I guarantee you the Celtics are still telling the Nets, thank you. So again, the Suns mortgaged their future for this, and it is not worked out. And I think this is a crash course, and it should be a crash course for the Suns organization and Matt Ishbia that, hey, you simply can't go out there and push a button and win a championship. This ain't the old NBA Live. It's not NBA 2K either. There's layers to it, like I said. The Suns are finding this out the hard way. And I guarantee you, if this team misses the postseason, if this team can't even get to the play-in tournament, there's going to be a lot of questions coming out of the Valley of the Sun, and there's going to be more roster and personnel upheaval in Phoenix as well. You can't just flip a switch and become a championship team. The Phoenix Suns have found that out the hard way. Let's see if they have what it takes to try to get out of their own way and find a way to play some postseason basketball this spring. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365 that you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Also, with the start of the 2025 Major League Baseball season right around the corner, please stay tuned to this channel over the next week as I'll have everything that you need to hear about the upcoming MLB season. But once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.